Out of nowhere, on the Friday before a long weekend here in Canada, Brendan Shanahan and the Toronto Maple Leafs organization drops a news bomb on the hockey world. Kyle Dubas, general manager of the Toronto Maple Leafs, no longer. Looks like the Toronto Maple Leafs will be on the search for a new GM for the 23-24 NHL season. Welcome back to Edgework here on the Hammer Betting Network, and we have breaking news. Of course, on the Friday of a long weekend here in Canada, the Toronto Maple Leafs decide now is the perfect time to drop on us the news that they have decided to part ways with general manager Kyle Dubas. And yes, they have decided to part ways with Kyle Dubas. According to the report here that was published at least by Frank Saravelli and multiple other NHL reporters, released by Leafs PR, it states, Brendan Shanahan, president and alternate governor of the Toronto Maple Leafs, announced today that the club has decided to part ways with general manager Kyle Dubas. Dubas' contract is set to expire on June 30th, and he will not return as Toronto's general manager next season. So we're going to break this down, what this press release indicates here, what this might mean going forward, what might have happened, why this might be the case for the Leafs to move on for Kyle Dubas. Is this for better? Is this for worse? But first things first, Moretto here, let's talk about what happened with this press release. You come out on Monday in the locker cleanouts. It seems like the team's heading in a direction here to re-sign Kyle Dubas. All signs indicate they want him back. Mm-hmm. He comes out and he says, hey, he's got to think about some things. And then radio silence from the Toronto Maple Leafs. This press release here, it seems like the Leafs have decided they're parting ways with Dubas and not the other way around. Is that kind of the same impression that you got here?
Yeah, definitely. This was definitely a situation where I think that the team made the decision not to bring Dubas back. I'm pretty sure the ball was in his court. Like, it seemed like, even just based on his comments on Monday, it sounded very much like there was an offer on the table for him, or there was, full intention of bringing him back. And, he was like, well, I'm going to take a step back and think about things. I think that scared the team a little bit into like, what does that mean? Like, your burnout and all this stuff. Like, I think they definitely raised some red flags. Ultimately, I think Dubas dug his own grave here. And sad thing is, I think that he helped the team in doing so. I think this was the right decision. I think the Leafs had to move on from him. And I was really hoping they would run it back again. And that's just not the case. Obviously, this means Keefe is gone. Just a massive, massive, massive boost to this team to get rid of Keefe behind the bench too. So yeah, tough day for Leafs haters.
Well, yeah, I was going to say, so to clarify, the reason this is a sad day for you here is because you would have liked to see the running back. You want to see the coach coming back. On the flip side here, I very clearly am a Leafs fan. I don't know if people can see behind, or if you followed along Edgework through the season, you would know that, or see me on the Leafs Digest or in the title there. But look, I am not a very opinionated person on Kyle Dubas one way or the other. I personally was not in a position of like, this guy needs to come back or this guy needs to be gone. I was kind of just open to either way, but the one thing that I would have needed kind of as my confirmation of like, okay, yeah, I'm fine with bringing this guy back, is the willingness to trade one of the four, because that to me was at the final point of like, this can't happen. This four can't come back. And it's not that these four aren't incredible players. They are. But in many ways, they are a very similar mindset maybe, or play style. And I heard Mike Rupp talking about it the other day, and he said the one thing here is people misconstrue the idea of toughness in the playoffs with maybe it's actually not toughness, and it's just the ability to take your level of play and mindset to another gear. And those guys lack that. And Dubas essentially staked his reputation on them for the 5 years that he was the GM and said, this is what it's going to be. We're going to rely on these guys. We're going to run it back. Well, 7 years later, he inherited a team that had 105 points in the regular season. And through the course of 5 years that he was the GM here, his average points in the regular season, 106. So it's not like he took this team and took it over the moon. And by the way, the only thing that he did differently than the previous GM was win one playoff round. And then what happened in the second round of that year? They lost the second round the exact same way, if not worse, than they had won the first round in previous years.
Also, what happened with the previous GM? He went on to win many playoff series in like a couple year span, went to a couple conference finals. Like the team
Yeah.
was trending this way anyways under Lou. In my opinion, they were young when he left and he was gone. Like if he had stayed on over these
Yeah.
last 3 years, 4 years, whatever, since Dubas took over, I mean, I'm sure they wouldn't have had less success. Let's put it that way. They definitely wouldn't have had less success.
Yeah, what were they going to do? Lose in the first round in one less game each
Yeah,
year? Like,
yeah.
okay, whoop-de-doo, you still lost in the first round. But for me, again, I saw adaptations in the way that he built the team year after year after year. I was happy with that. I think myself, the way I look at it is a little bit more of trending towards a different direction of how NHL teams are built. It is not the LA Kings of 2012 and 2014 anymore, where it's full just size and heaviness and that style of play with Daryl Sutter behind the bench. But it's also not what it was when Kyle Dubas first got here and tried to make it all speed and all skill. Like there is this middle ground in terms of winning. You see that there in Dallas, you see it in Vegas, like you're seeing it in these teams remaining in the playoffs. He was building that way, but the biggest problem to me is still at the end of the day was the four. And those four let you down each and every year, and he was continuing to stake his reputation on that. And if he wasn't willing to move on, then at some point you were going to have to move on from him and the people looking over this. And to my next point of where this goes with this, and I'm curious your thoughts on it, but we have no idea who the next GM is going to be. Very clearly. There's plenty of options out there of guys who could come in. Could they find someone internally? Brandon Pridham, who was the AGM, the guy who helped write the cap here for the NHL. Eric Tulsky out there with Carolina currently, rumored to be looking for a general manager position. We saw Pittsburgh had interest in him. Now it looks like the Leafs would likely have interest in him considering their vacancy at GM. But at bare minimum here, this means that whoever's coming here will have a different look, a different opinion, and a different emotional attachment to the situation than what Kyle Dubas had. They could think similarly. They could have a very similar outlook on things and build things the same way. But at bare minimum, it will not be the exact same because we would have been having to ask Kyle Dubas in Toronto to look at things differently, whereas the person coming in here just naturally will look at things a little bit differently. But in terms of the change that you could see here from the GM, Alex, like what kind of outlook do you think possibly could the new guy have? Is it going to be looking at changing a whole makeup of things? Is it going to be looking at maybe a different voice behind the bench, the top four? Like, how do you think that a new GM coming in here changes things? And does it change anything at all? Part two of this, if it's Brandon Pridham just stepping up from internally to take over the position.
Pridham would be an awful hire. Awful. Would make no sense. I don't know why you get rid of Dubas just to bring in such a like-minded, similar guy who's basically worked under Dubas this whole time and learned everything he knows from Dubas. It would make no sense. I don't think there's I would honestly be shocked if they did that. I think it would be a horrible move. I think the big thing is you got to obviously go outside for a fresh look, right? And I mean, you bring in someone who's going to, more so than anything, change the culture, which I think is the most important thing right now. Someone who's going to hold these guys accountable, someone who's maybe, not to say it's a country club atmosphere there or whatever, but obviously it resembles a lot more that than it does, than it does, what Sutter is created out in, obviously, Sutter being a head coach on a GM is different, but still you have to change the culture. I think that's one of the biggest problems with this team. Is not necessarily the roster. The roster is good. We know the roster is good. The roster has been good for a while. The culture and the way they kind of, fail in the playoffs, those are all kind of intertwined. And I think that bringing someone in who's going to hold these guys accountable, who's going to shake things up a little bit, say that, this stuff isn't going to, we're not going to stand for this, whatever. Obviously a different coach is going to help a lot in changing that too. A new voice behind the bench, someone who's maybe going to be a bit tougher on these guys, not hand them ice time and hand them whatever they want and, let them get away with anything. It's honestly
apologize for calling them out.
Yeah. Honestly, that's what needs to change more so than anything. That's why I think this was kind of long overdue. And that is Dubas's biggest shortcoming was that it was you said it, there's this infatuation with the media here in Toronto where Dubas cares. Dubas cared. He cared. You see millions and millions of tweets from everyone, people in the media, fans, whatever, how much Dubas cares about his players. Okay, he's the only GM in the world who cares. Sure. But I mean, you also can care to a fault. You have to be able to hold, he was living and dying by these core four. At one point you have to hold guys accountable. And, if you want to win with these 4 guys, fine. But like, you have to do better with your negotiations, whatever. It all comes like sort of full circle. And I think he, it was the fact that he created this sort of culture, everything that, that he did wrong sort of, I think, fed into that idea. So I think it was just more so a culture change that needed. You're going to have someone who's going to come in, who's going to have a fresh look. And, maybe they don't deal one of the core 4 guys. Maybe they do deal one of the core 4, whatever. I think either way, though, you're going to see the culture change here. And I think that's what's kind of really, really needed.
Yeah, well, I mean, you talk about it with the GM going. This obviously means that we're going to see a change in coach, because it is very, very, very rare that you would see a new general manager come in and keep the old guy. Even with that being said, I told you before we even hopped on here, like 10 minutes after the announcement was made that Kyle Dubas and the Leafs have parted ways, it was announced that everyone with the Toronto Marlies, the Leafs minor or AHL team, was fired. All their coaches and stuff was cleaned out, and those are all guys that Kyle Dubas had hired and brought through there. So the likelihood of them keeping Sheldon Keefe at the NHL level is, I mean, especially given that news, it's pretty much non-existent. I can't see that being the case, but you look forward here to, okay, next steps for this Leafs team. We're looking at outside hires. I would agree with you. That's probably the way to go for this. You look at Matthews, Marner, Nylander. No movement clauses kick in July 1st of this year. The NHL entry draft, June 28th. We're currently sitting here May 19th, so you've got just over a month until the draft. What do you see kind of being the case with some of these guys moving forward and how this organization proceeds? How quickly do you think they try to get things done and announcing and figuring things out for how they go forward?
I mean, you're going to want to be very thorough in this process, because you don't always see a team like with a roster this good, this kind of close to being able to potentially win a Stanley Cup or take that next step, like change their GM, right? So like they're in a very unique position that we haven't seen all that often. Like, you want to move quick, but you also really want to be mindful of not hiring the wrong guy, because it's such a delicate spot for the organization that they're in right now with, obviously, like you said, Matthews' contract expiring soon, Nylander next year, Marner 2 years after. So I think they're going to want to move quick, but obviously like they're going to want to be thorough. It's hard to see someone come in and like make massive changes instantly. So I don't think we'll see like huge pieces necessarily move before the draft. Obviously, like, anything can happen. It entirely depends on who they bring in. I think it's honestly like kind of an impossible question to answer, because like I think every GM will have a different sort of pitch to, in the interview process. Like different candidates are going to want to do different things, and that's obviously going to be a huge part of this whole process. And you have to wonder, like, what does Shanahan actually want done? Did he just want to like change the culture? Does he want like a bigger roster shakeup? Is he going to be more involved in things going forward now? Is he going to want someone who's like going to, kind of defer to him more so he can have a much more say in things, or is he going to want to kind of give the keys to someone? So I think we'll know what Shanahan's involvement is going to be based on who he hires. If he, does hire someone with a bit less experience, or, if he goes after like a guy like a Gillis or a Doug Wilson or whatever, say, like, I don't think, we'll see Shanahan be nearly as involved. Like a guy like that isn't going to want to come in and sort of split duties. Right. So we'll learn a lot based on that. But like, I don't know. I don't know how they want to approach this, honestly.
Okay. Speculation for you. This is coming from someone who follows the Leafs as closely as I do. Again, you know me, I'm not predicting this to be the case or saying this is happening or anything. This is pure speculation, but I'm going to throw it out there. I'm interested to hear what your thoughts are as an outsider on the situation. Mm-hmm. Joel Quenneville is the type of coach that this team, in my opinion, would be looking to bring in here to move forward. Someone who has had success, someone who is a little bit harder on the players, will hold them more accountable, has had structural success in the organizations that he's been in, whether it was in Chicago and winning those cups there when he first started in Florida, and how the team started that season before he was removed from that situation. Kyle Dubas would have never hired him here based on the culture that he has built and all the things that he stands for. Regardless of what you think of those, let's just take that aside. We know Kyle Dubas would not have hired him in this situation. That's kind of the direction you have to go, though. That type of guy. It was announced this morning that Gary Bettman at the end of this season will talk with Joel Quenneville about him rehabilitating and essentially coming back to the NHL and the likelihood of that happening. We're going to put tinfoil hats on here. What do you think the likelihood is here that maybe the Leafs were looking to go into that direction? Maybe something along with this was Dubas wasn't interested in that, didn't want this, and that helps lead to the decision. Could we possibly see Joel Quenneville being the next head coach here in Toronto?
So,
you see where I'm going with this?
Yes, no, 100%. I see exactly where you're going with this, and it makes a lot of sense. And I think that Quenneville is exactly what this team needs. Like you said, and you're talking about changing the culture. Like, that's how you change the culture. You bring in a guy like that, and you're going to, honestly, you bring in a guy like that, you're going to learn a lot about Matthews. You're going to learn a lot about Nylander. You're going to learn a lot about Marner. Do these guys want to be here because it's like the lack of accountability, the country club atmosphere? Oh, we have a guy who believes in us, who's not hard on us, whatever. Like, is that why you want to be here, or do you want to be here because you want to win? And you're going to learn pretty quickly, bringing in a guy like Quenneville, why these guys are here and why these guys want to be here. And if the latter is the case, and it's because of the culture that they had under Dubas, then you probably don't want to keep them around anyways. And you're going to learn that, and you're going to be able to get rid of them. You're going to be able to move on. You'll probably be better off for it. I don't know, though, if that's why Dubas is gone. Like, I don't, obviously, I know you're not saying that, they fired him because he wouldn't hire Quenneville or whatever. Obviously, you're not saying that. Like, there's still, maybe is that, a small part of it? I wonder if they even would have had time to have those conversations, if they would have thought that far ahead. I completely agree that Dubas would probably never have signed off on hiring Quenneville. I don't think that's at all, part of his, DNA, as a guy who cares just so much. But I think that you obviously consider bringing in Quenneville. It's hard. It's obviously a little bit the off ice stuff and whatever the issues that happened with the Blackhawks. You're not going to just completely dismiss those. So I'm just talking purely from a hockey perspective on how much that would benefit the team and how that's exactly what they need. But I don't think that Dubas by any account was asked about it and that this factored into the decision. But based on what I can understand and what I can gather, it is that Dubas was somewhat blindsided by this a little bit. So I think that, or Dubas didn't necessarily expect this to be happening. Maybe thought that obviously you don't expect to be fired based on his comments on Monday, whatever. It sounds like he expected to be here if he wanted to be. I think that he was a little bit blindsided by this whole decision. So yeah, I don't think he was asked about that. I don't think this factored into it, but I completely agree that if he was, or whatever, or if this was presented to him at any point, or if he was stayed on and, if he did stay on and they asked him about Q, that he would not have signed off on it.
All right, let's close this thing up. I have just rapid fire questions. We'll both answer yes, no, but just the Maple Leafs' next general manager is someone who is currently in the Leafs organization.
No, would make no sense, would be a horrible mistake.
Okay. Exact same answer here. Nothing different.
Yeah.
Sheldon Keefe is gone as the Leafs head coach.
Absolutely. Yes.
Okay. Final thing here. All four of the Leafs core four are wearing Toronto Maple Leafs jerseys next season.
No, I don't think so. I think, honestly, I don't even think that has to do necessarily with just fresh eyes and Dubas too, because I think it just has to do with the fact that the likelihood of being able to keep all of these guys together beyond next season with Nylander and Matthews both hitting UFA is very low. So you almost have to move on from one of these guys or something. You have to do something to create the space or to, not lose someone for nothing next year, because that would be disastrous to lose one of those guys for nothing.
Yeah, I'm on the same page. The only thing that I could look at here and say maybe, yes, they're all here, is that you don't get the offer. And if we're going to talk about who's starting the beginning of the season, maybe not who's finishing the season, I think those could be two different things potentially even within this, because maybe there's a situation where at some point during the season or at the deadline, they decide to make some type of change and move one of the guys. But there's only a slight possibility for me that the answer is yes, and it's just that the deal's not on the table. Otherwise, I agree with you. And I think that whoever comes in here, that's where they're looking, is how can we change this and what's the biggest way we can improve the team going forward or add that cultural change. And I think that it starts with those guys. So I think that's where it is.
And it definitely bears mentioning that, like, this is going to weigh heavily on Matthews and his future with this team, right? Because obviously he had a very tight I'm not saying that now Matthews is gone. Definitely not the case. But like now I think Matthews' comments on Monday are completely irrelevant. Now everything, you take a step back. Now it's like, okay, now I'm going to reevaluate like what is going on, what's the direction of this team, who's coming in, what's going to change. Like everything he said about like, I want to be here and I want to play here. I think that has a lot more to do with the fact that, you know, Dubas was here, Keefe was here, whatever. He was familiar with the surroundings, and that was like made under that context, right? With that changing now, I'm not saying he wants to leave, but like obviously those comments can still be thrown out the window, and now it's like there's going to be a reevaluating from him.
Okay, if Austin Matthews staying in Toronto is dependent on his boss being his friend or Mitch Marner still wearing a Leafs jersey, I don't think that it is worthwhile to keep him around.
Completely agree. Completely agree.
You signed for a 5-year deal that walked you right to free agency. You took basically the most amount of money that you could have taken at the time. Now we're going to be in a position here where potentially you want to re-up on another 4 or 5 year deal, become the highest paid player in the NHL again, take all the money that you can possibly get out of this organization while simultaneously saying, I want to win, I want to win, I want to win here. And you're going to do that, take that money, not have playoff success year after year after year after year, 7 years into you being here with this team now. And now because Kyle Dubas is no longer the GM and there's rumors out there that Mitch Marner could be gone, you're going to say you don't want to be here. Or on the flip side, you're going to say, I actually want more money now. To me, don't see that being worthwhile because, yeah, I get it, being upset or wanting to be around certain players who can help you win, but to be around people because they are your friends, this is the NHL.
Yep.
This is the best league in the entire world as far as professional hockey goes. You're here to win, not to make friends and not to be buddies with the guys sitting around you. You make your friends along the way, 100%. But that's not the purpose of playing in the NHL. You're here to win. So if that's your mindset, that's your mentality, then maybe that says a whole lot more about why this team doesn't succeed in the playoffs than we even realize.
That's what I'm saying. Like it's about changing the culture, and in changing the culture, you'll learn a lot about these guys. That's what you have to do going forward, because you will get your answers about, never mind does Matthews want to stay, you'll get your answers about, do you want Matthews around? You'll get your answers about, do we want Marner around? You'll get your answers about, do we want Nylander around? Tavares kind of irrelevant here because you're not moving him regardless, but like you'll get your answers about these guys and you will be better off for it. So like that's just the way it has to be, because like honestly, you look at the discourse around this whole Dubas firing, like it's insane. This team has been a colossal failure for like 5 years. Like they've significantly underachieved every year, but no one is saying it. Like everyone refuses to say it, and they're like mourning Dubas leaving. Like you guys just won back-to-back cups. Like, it doesn't make any sense. We're like, I can't believe we got rid of this guy. Like, well, geez, it's been like 6 years and he's not won anything. Like, at what point do you actually vocalize that and say, hey, we've won nothing under this guy? The culture is obviously a problem. There's a lot of things that are a problem here. He's made many mistakes along the way. He's obviously done many good things as a GM too. This is not to just completely shit on Dubas. He's had many good moves that he's made, but he's made a number of bad moves that have, hurt this team a little bit too. And the fact is, like, he's done nothing to change the culture. He's ride or die with his boy Keefe. And, like, this is the type of stuff that, like, no one is, like, you see the articles that come out after they lose from, like, guys like CJ and all this stuff. And it's just, like, there's no accountability. Like, this team has been a complete failure for 5 years, and no one wants to say it. Like, twice.
Because they had their chances. They generated expected goals.
Yeah, of course. Like, twice now they've been gifted like relatively straightforward pass to the Stanley Cup. The year in at least the conference finals, like the North Division year, should have beaten the Habs, should have gone through Winnipeg, no problem. That should have been 2 slam dunk series. This year, I mean, you beat Tampa, whatever, say what you want about the series and how they played and all that stuff. Nonetheless, you beat Tampa. You're kind of gifted a path to the conference finals playing against, Florida. I'm sorry, like, oh, we got beat by Bob. You can't just like throw your hands up every year and say, oh, we got goalie. Like, it doesn't work like that. There's ways around that. There's great goalies that lose series every single round. That's not like you did not get goalied. You lost in 5. You could not do what you needed to do, what got you there. And that happens every year in the playoffs. And you keep standing by and praising this guy. It's like someone just has to come out and say, hey, we have underachieved and we have failed under Dubas. And that's it. It's okay to say that. Like, it's okay. You're not going to hurt his feelings. Like, it's going to be okay. He doesn't even read what you're writing. I guarantee it. Like, it's going to be okay.
Yep. He's the general manager of an NHL team.
It
comes with the job.
But he cares so much. So, like, so he gets a pass on everything because of how much he cares about his players. Like, God, yeah.
Well, I think that's all I have in terms of the Dubas. I'm going to call it a firing. I think that this was the Leafs walking away from him. I no longer believe that this was him taking time and coming to the conclusion here today that he was the one walking away. The wording of this, how long this went on, how quiet everything was, no. The Leafs parted ways with him, and immediately firing the Marlies' entire staff, to me, again, was another indication here that this was like clean slate, done with all of this kind of situation. So the Leafs fire Kyle Dubas. Let us know in the comments below your thoughts. What does this mean for the Leafs? Who do you think will be the next GM? Do they hire inside? Do they hire outside? Again, I think outside is best option as well here, but let us know below. If you enjoyed the content, please make sure to subscribe here to the Edgework HQ YouTube channel, as well as liking this video. But to everyone who tuned in here today, greatly appreciate you taking the time. Enjoy the weekend, the long weekend here, the weekend of hockey. Enjoy Leafs fans stewing over this online for the next month, year. I don't know how long this is going to last. We'll see, but it should be interesting nonetheless. But Moretto, thanks for joining me here today to talk about this one. Enjoy your weekends, and good luck on your bets.